twice. On the first resolution of the ability, you redirect one of the targets. On the next resolution, you change another one.
So it does not matter how many. It does not matter whether Spellskite is the target of the original spell.
Yeah, the question is, does it matter whether the Spellskite was the target of the spell originally? The answer is no. Next, Binds of the Vastwood. Binds of the Vastwood is a card that comes into play with effect. It has a relevant text, which is target creature can't do a target spell or abilities your opponents control this turn. This is not hexproof. It's subtly different than hexproof. This means that on resolution of Binds of the Vastwood, the controller of Binds of the Vastwood opponents can no longer target a creature with spells or abilities this turn. So suppose player A casts Binds of the Vastwood, targeting player B's Spellskite. When this resolves, player A, who controls the Binds of the Vastwood resolution, can still target Spellskite that turn, but player B cannot. So what you'll typically see happen here is player A will try to bluff by Binds of the Vastwooding player B's Spellskite, and then try to make their opponent think that the Spellskite can't have future pump spells that turn redirected to it. Now, here's a play that's getting into policy slightly, but the player can't lie here and like say when they cast another pump spell and the other player tries to redirect a future pump spell to Spellskite after Binds of the Vastwooding the Spellskite, they can't be like, oh, you shouldn't even bother to activate your Spellskite, it's not going to work. If the Spellskite ability is activated targeting that future pump spell, when it goes to resolve, it's a legal target for Spellskite to change the target itself. Because while player B is in control of the Spellskite, can't target Spellskite with their own spells and abilities anymore, player A still can. So this is the bluff. Although the player who's using the Binds of Vastwood might actually think that player B can't redirect their spells to the Spellskite anymore, so if this happens, you'll have to step in and show the players that in fact Spellskite can still redirect spells and abilities that are controlled by the controller of Binds of the Vastwood.
Can you? I don't know, I'm a little lost. So, if you play Bonds.
Yeah,
I play Bonds. What is your name up front? One of you guys, let's say, what's your name?
Josh.
So, Joshua has Spellskite.
Yeah.
And you play Bonds on your own creature.
Yeah.
And then you redirect your creature to the Spellskite. Now, who can target the Spellskite now? Now
I can.
You can still target it. You cannot target your own Spellskite, but you can still redirect to your Spellskite. Or
You can redirect his
spells, but he cannot play his own and
target Spellskite. Yeah. Okay. When using one more frequently in this card was say weapons of Learnment of legal in this format. A player would cast Learnment targeting Deceiver, Exarch, or Pestermite, and you could bind to the Vastwood that Deceiver, Exarch, or Pestermite to make it not be the target of spells or abilities that your opponent control this turn. So then when Learnment went to resolve, it would counter the solution for these or with illegal targets.
Yep.
Good. It's not about Spellskite. Next, Bloodmoon, everyone's favorite card. Modern Fun Police. Bloodmoon has four very elegant words on it. Non-basic lands are mountains. And despite this incredible simplicity, it's one of the most complicated cards in Modern that will lead to some of the most interesting judge calls you have. One thing to be careful about with Bloodmoon, this doesn't come up frequently in Modern, but it comes up frequently in older formats like Legacy and Vintage, is that the text on the card you see in front of you might deviate significantly from the actual formal text of the card. So be careful if you see the dark printing of Bloodmoon, which says all non-basic lands are now basic mountains. They're mountains, not basic mountains. There's a subtle difference. Basically, it still means they're still not basic lands. So what does Bloodmoon do? So when a land becomes a specific land, basic land type, there's 5 things that happen. So it's going to lose 3 things and gain 2 things. So what it's going to lose is abilities, and it's going to lose abilities from the 3 following sources. If the rules text of that land granted any abilities, it's going to lose those abilities. So anything just printed off the card. Any abilities granted by its previous land types are going to be lost. So say you had a forest island, it's going to lose the tap for blue and tap for green mana that was granted to that land by its forest and island subtypes. And the last thing it's going to lose is the abilities that were granted to that land by copy effects. So say like Vesuva is a common land that copies lands. Any abilities that were granted by the copy effect of say Vesuva is no longer going to be granting abilities to that land under Bloodmoon, assuming that Vesuva is copying a non-basic land. And then you're going to gain 2 things from Bloodmoon. You're going to gain the subtype mountain. Now, notice this only causes the land to gain the subtype mountain and not make it gain any other or lose any other creature subtypes or equipment subtypes or anything else like that. So if something has a creature subtype and a land subtype, it's only going to have the land subtype become modified. And finally, it's going to add the ability to tap and red to your mana pool. So Blood Moon does these 5 things. It makes you lose abilities, although you have these resources, and becomes a mountain and it taps for red. So I'm going to work through some examples of questions.
So, try it over turns into
That's
a...
one of my examples.
Yeah, okay.
So, starting with Blood Moon examples. First one is going to be Shocklands. Shocklands are a cycle of lands, original Ravnica, Return to Ravnica. They all have 2 basic land types, and then they have an ability that says add this land into the battlefield. You may pay 2 life. If you don't, it enters the battlefield path. Under Blood Moon, while Overgrown Tomb is on the battlefield, it's going to be a land, subtype mountain named Overgrown Tomb, with the ability to tap at red mana to your mana pool. You're going to still apply the replacement effect of Overgrown Tomb, because you apply this replacement effect in whatever zone the Overgrown Tomb was in before it entered the battlefield. So if you're playing it usually from your hand or maybe sometimes from your library, Overgrown Tomb has this replacement effect before it enters the battlefield, and so basically you're going to have a very painful mountain or a very slow mountain. You're either going to lose your life for a mountain, or you're going to have your mountain in the battlefield path. Alright, next, Dryad Arbor.
Yeah.
So Dryad Arbor is a land creature, subtype Forest Dryad, it's a 1/1. It has a color indicator which makes it green, and it has the ability to use the forest to tap that green mana to your mana pool. This is everyone's favorite cheaty face printing of Dryad Arbor because it has it looks like a forest, and if you see it among a bunch of forests, it'll look like a forest. The older printing of this from Future Sight had an ability written on the card that said Dryad Arbor is green. It's important to note that this has a color indicator making it green now, which functionally makes the card behave differently under Blood Moon. So now the question is, what does Dryad Arbor look like under Blood Moon? So we're going to apply all the things that we said we were going to do before that Blood Moon changed about Dryad Arbor. So what's going to change is that it's going to lose any previous land subtypes it had. So forest is a land subtype, so now it's going to lose the forest subtype and gain the mountain subtype. Also, because it's now a mountain and not a forest, it has the ability to tap at red mana to your mana pool. It's still a creature. Blood Moon, remember, the specific things I said Blood Moon is going to do, none of them interact with creatures whatsoever. So it's still a creature, and it's also still a dryad, because Blood Moon causes land subtypes to be lost, but not any other subtypes. And it's still a 1/1. So this is what happens to Dryad Arbor under Blood Moon.
And it's still green, right?
And it's still green. So the color indicator making it green. Back before color indicators were introduced in Innistrad, Dryad Arbor had a character defining ability that made it green, and so Blood Moon would have removed that ability. But now there's a color indicator, so Blood Moon doesn't interact with that whatsoever.
So, and it would lose the ability to tap for green because it's granted.
That's granted by force, so
By
that ability is lost. Okay, next. Blood Moon Spreading Seas. So the relevant text on Spreading Seas is it's an enchantment subject aura. It's an enchant land, and it has the text enchanted land is an island. So here, Blood Moon and Spreading Seas both interact in layer 4, the type layer. And assuming we're talking about Spreading Seas enchanting a non-basic land, they both apply the same layer, and there's no dependency because neither of them changes how the other one is applied. So if there's Blood Moon and a Spreading Seas enchanting a non-basic land, whichever one came down last wins. So Blood Moon was played, and then Spreading Seas was played, that land will be an island, and Spreading Seas was played first, and then Blood Moon was played, then that land will be a mountain. Finally, Urborg. So Urborg is this wonderful land. Its relevant text is legendary land, and it says the text each land is a swamp in addition to its other land types. So what happens to Urborg under Blood Moon? Well, here we get into dependencies. So here we have 2 effects that both apply in the same layer, and depending on the order you apply them in, it changes how one of those effects is applied in that same layer, or something. And so, if you applied Blood Moon first and then Urborg, you would have Blood Moon turn everything into a mountain, and then Urborg would no longer have an ability to apply. So you wouldn't apply the Urborg ability. If you tried it in the other order, first Urborg would make everything a swamp, and then Blood Moon would make Urborg lose its ability after every mountain becomes swamp. So because we have a dependency, we're going to apply Blood Moon first, no matter what order they enter the battlefield. And at that point, once we've applied Blood Moon's ability, then Urborg no longer has an ability to be applied in layer 4. So So the short version of this is no matter what order they came down, Urborg is just going to be a mountain, and nothing else is going to become small. And okay, a last Blood Moon example. So I said that Blood Moon made objects lose abilities granted by the rule text, by their land type, and by any abilities granted by copy effects. However, if we were to say animate a land in response to a Blood Moon being cast, when that Blood Moon would resolve, then the creature land that you animated would still be a creature until end of turn. So my example here is Raging Ravine. It has the ability that until end of turn makes Raging Ravine be a 3/3 red and green elemental creature with whenever this creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it's still a land. If you were to activate Raging ability in response to a Blood Moon, then Raging Ravine would still be all of this until end of turn with that attack trigger. Although when the turn ended, then it would go back to being just a mountain.
So it still needs the attack trigger, you said.
It would still have the attack trigger.
Will be value even ready to blood and resolves and it's still creatures.
Yeah, it's a creature mountain. It would be a creature red green elemental with that trigger. Similarly, say you had like Ink Moth or Blink Moth action, it would still have flying backward. But and so those abilities that were granted to it by activating the creature land's activation ability, it would still have all those abilities until end of turn. But at the end of the turn, that would go away and be a mountain. Question?
Also a note, if that creature just entered the battlefield that turn and you activate and respond to a blood moon, it cannot tap on that.
Yeah, it would be summoning sick, so you couldn't have it command that.
We're not going without the attack.
I mean, not specific to this one, but you think that.
Yeah, the creature land enters the battlefield untapped. If you were to activate it, at any point before you began under your control at the beginning of your untapped set, it would start to summoning.
It loses Inkmoth and Blinkmoth specifically.
That's something different that goes with as ability.
So indestructible. Okay, so this is slightly before I started judging.
That's Lyrics and Forge. Yeah, Lyrics and Forge still, Chris.
Well, I believe you're talking about the M15 rules change where they made it indestructible.
They do a keyword ability statement about
Unlockable, not a keyword.
Yeah, and unlockable got downgraded is definitely not a keyword. I believe that the Dark Steel Citadel would have been indestructible.
Yeah.
Would have been destructible, but I don't know for certain because it would have blocked that entire.
Yeah, it still was.
Yeah, because you would make Dark Steel Citadel lose any abilities from the rules text, and that ability that said this permanent is indestructible is part of the inherent rules text that Blood Moon would delete. Okay, so now getting into
So let's say you have an ink wall and you animate it with Tessera, Agent of Bolus. So now it's an artifact feature.
artifact creature.
Huh?
Can you?
Tessera 2.0
Yeah.
turns Ink Moth into a 5/5 artifact feature.
Okay.
And then Blood Moon comes in. And then at the end of turn, what happens?
So the end of what would happen is that if something becomes an artifact creature, it's implied that it keeps all of its previous types. No other type change does this to artifact creatures. So Tezzeret 2.0 targeted and animated Bleakmoth Nexus or Bleakmoth Nexus. At the end of the turn, it would be a 5/5 artifact creature that was still land. It would, however, lost any of its inherent rules text, and it would have a subtype mountain and have that red mana for your mana pool. So it would be an artifact creature, land, subtype mountain, and it would be a 5/5.
It loses the honor from the Ink Moth.
Yeah, then it would,
But it was
it would
replaced
still
by
have the
Tezzeret.
artifact creature ability that was granted by Tezzeret. Question?
Could you, just quickly go over the interaction with Blood Moon and Legendary?
Legendary is type, so Blood Moon doesn't interact whatsoever.
So basically, like for instance, because I know some of the is like running season runs with the Eldrazi deck where, if I have Ravine under a Blood Moon, then that's like the second one.
Sure, so legendary rule checks names, and so no matter what types any of the legendary permanents are, true legendary permanents would have the same name, they would die. Even under Blood Moon doesn't interact with names whatsoever. Question?
Can you go over Blood Moon and Valkyrie the Molten Pinnacle?
Sure, so Valkyrie the Molten Pinnacle, which will have its own little subsection at the very end, has this ability that says whenever a land is mounted with Valkyrie under control, if you control 5 other mountains, you may bolt something. And so how triggering and applying replacement effects works, first we apply all the replacement effects. So Valkyrie Pinnacle would enter the battlefield with mountain. At that point we do our trigger check, and Valkyrie Pinnacle at that point doesn't have a trigger ability anymore. So Spellskite's ability will never trigger under Blood Moon, even if you make a bunch of bounties at the same time battle. Okay, now that I know the Blood Moon, I'm going to get into my grab spells that are talking.
So, how does Blood Moon fight with things that are granted by super types of Devil Strip? So, like if you have Darksteel Forge and Darksteel Citadel and Blood Moon, so that your Blood Moon gland is still an artifact and Darksteel Forge is trying to make it indestructible. Is that timestamps or is that always the same case?
So I said that Blood Moon causes abilities to be lost from rules text and from copy effects and from old land types. So Darksteel Citadel is not one of these classes of abilities, so the land would still be indestructible, no matter what order they come out. Okay, now that I know the Blood Moon, I'm going to get into my grab bag of modern drafts. I'm going to start with Raging Ravine again. So, once again, Raging Ravine, you can pay this cost and make it a 3/3 red and green element, creature token with this trigger and element turn, whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. You can activate this twice, and when you attack, you get 2 attack triggers. The last time I saw this come up was at a modern event, and before that it came up with like World, and Shu hated it, like in the cube draft portion. So, this is going to come up with Raging Ravine. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the Urza Tron lands. So these are a cycle of lands, Urza's Tower, Urza's Mine, Urza's Power Plant. They all have the ability to tap at a close, manage your mana pool, and then if you control an Urza's Mine and an Urza's Power Plant, and the other ones check the other Urza's lands appropriately, tap to add more mana to your mana pool. Tower takes 3 mana, and Mine and Power Plant have 2 mana. This is a templating that isn't really used anymore. You'll notice that it says if you control an Urza's Mine and an Urza's Power Plant, not say a land named Urza's Mine and a land named Urza's Power Plant. This is because it's checking for lands with these subtypes and not something with these names. So Urza's Power actually has the subtype Urza's, possesses Urza's, and Tower. And so
that's my favorite land type is Urza.
Yeah, Urza's. There's also a land called Urza's Factory that just has Urza's as a subtype, that possesses Urza's. And so what these lands are checking for is something with the subtype Urza's Mine, Urza's Power Plant. So suppose there were an Urza's Mine, Urza's Power Plant, and Urza's Tower on the battlefield, and say the Urza's Tower had a spreading signal on it. So as we talked about becoming a land type before, it's going to be an Urza's Tower. It'll be a land subtype island because it'll lose all of its previous land types, and it will only have the ability to tap that blue mana to your mana pool. So in the other Tron lands, check to see if you have what's called Tron. It'll see that you don't control an Urza's Tower. Because even though you have a land named Urza's Tower, you don't have a land with the subtypes Urza's and Tower. So if you mess with the subtypes of these lands, you're not going to have Tron unless you have the same Tron lands. So this self-replacement effect won't be applied. Okay. Next, Angel of Grace. So Angel of Grace is a card with relevant text of you can't lose the game this turn, and your opponents can't win the game this turn. And until their turn damage that would reduce your life total to less than 1, reduces it to 1 instead. So there's a couple things going on here. The first thing to know about is that Angel of Grace doesn't stop damage resulting in you taking effect, taking poison counters. So the effect mechanic is a mechanic that causes the result of damage to cause a player to take poison counters. That poison counter replacement. So when you're dealing damage, there's a 3-part sequence. So first you deal the damage subject to replacement effects, then you process the damage into results subject to applicable replacement effects that interact with those results, and finally you have the damage event. And so this replacement effect of interacting with the results of damage doesn't is applied after the result of damage from its source to the effect becomes poison counters. So this doesn't interact with the effect whatsoever. The next thing to know about with Angel of Grace is that it doesn't modify damage events that start with the player already having 0 or less life. So if the player has 0 or less life, Angel of Grace replacement effect is not going to cause them to gain life up to 1. This has to do with the meaning of the word reduce. But how can a player have 0 or less life? How are they casting this Angel of Grace? Well, they're going to have Phyrexian Unlife. This he's playing the same deck, the Ad Nauseam combo deck, which will have another card I mentioned later in this talk. So Phyrexian Unlife is this card that says you don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. And it also has, as long as you have 0 or less life, all damage is dealt to you as though its source had an effect. There's a couple things going on here. The first thing to know about with Phyrexian Unlife is that this replacement effect doesn't kick in until you actually have 0 or less life. So what you're typically going to see is, say, if a player with Phyrexian Unlife is, say, 1 life, and they're being attacked for, say, 10 damage. When you do the turn-based action at the beginning of the combat damage step of having the damage event happen, that Phyrexian Unlife won't kick in because the damage event doesn't start with the player having 0 or less life. So if I have a Phyrexian Unlife and I'm at 1, and I get attacked for 10, I'm going to go to -9, not 1 and 9 poison. I'll go to -9 life. At that point, for any future damage events, Phyrexian Unlife's replacement effect will apply. But the typical playtime you're going to see is the player will be attacked for a bunch of damage while Phyrexian Unlife in play, and they're just going to go to negative punch. Alright, next, the interaction between Angel's Grace and Phyrexian Unlife. So, Angel's Grace interacts with the result, the replacement effect that applies to the result of damage. But in fact, turning the result of damage into poison counters happens before you apply the replacement effect of Angel's Grace. So this means if I'm at 0 or less life, and I play an Angel's Grace, and I have a Phyrexian Unlife in play, the Angel's Grace will stop me from losing the game this turn, but it won't stop me from taking damage from infect. And so it basically does nothing but make me live until the end of the turn. And at that point, I might still be alive or not, but I'll still definitely take lots of poison damage. Okay, next, I'm going to be talking about the example I know you were all expecting. Okay, so, question?
Yeah, there's a question about Angel's Grace before we go to the next one. With the Angel's Grace not modifying the damage, for example, say that you were at 4 life. I attack you with my 5/5 creature. Angel's Grace will keep you alive in the situation. So you can put you over instead.
Sure.
If my 5/5 creature had lifelink at this point, how much life would I gain?
Sure. So lifelink modifies the results of damage. You have a player having that damage, have that player gain 5 life. And so when we're dealing the damage, lifelink applied earlier. So the 3-part sequence of dealing damage, there was first you deal the damage as subject to replacement effects that interact with how damage is dealt. Then you process it into results, and then you have deal the damage event. So lifelink, I believe it actually interacts with results. I'm pretty sure it interacts with results. I'm not 100% sure here. But either way, it is applied before Angel's Grace replacement effect applies when you're processing the damage into results. That happens after you process the damage results, then you apply replacement effects to interact with those results. So no matter what, you're still going to gain the life. No matter what Angel's Grace causes the life to be set.
So I gave my full amount, not the reduced amount?
Yeah, you'll gain the full of 5 life from lifeline. Right. Next, we talk about bolts and Tarmogoyfs. So, lightning bolts don't kill Tarmogoyfs, state-based actions kill Tarmogoyfs. So, one of the many state-based actions is creatures with lethal damage on them are placed into their own graveyards. So, suppose I have a Tarmogoyf with no permanents, with no types in any graveyards, all of them are empty, and it gets lightning bolted. So, we're going to apply the spell ability of Lightning Bolt, deal 3 damage to Tarmogoyf. Tarmogoyf will be an 0/1 with 3 damage on it. Then, as the last part of resolving Lightning Bolt, will go into his own graveyard. At this point, Tarmogoyf is a 1/2 with 3 damage marked on it. Then we are going to apply. Then we're going to apply our state-based actions. Tarmogoyf is a 1/2 with 3 damage marked on it. It's lethal, and the Tarmogoyf is going to get to his own graveyard. Okay. Now let's back that up with more card types in the graveyard. Suppose there's an artifact creature like an artifact in the graveyard. And we run through the same example again. So now we're going to bolt Tarmogoyf and put the lightning bolt in the graveyard. There are 3 card types in graveyards: artifact, creature, and land. Tarmogoyf is a 3/4 with 3 damage marked on it, and it will live. So even though Tarmogoyf was a 2/3 when this all started, it'll be a 3/4 and lightning bolt in the graveyard, and Tarmogoyf has 3 damage marked on it. So Tarmogoyf will live. So to reiterate, lightning bolts don't kill Tarmogoyfs, state-based actions kill Tarmogoyfs. Okay, next I'm going to talk about Sunburst and Taxes. So Sunburst has a similar mechanic of Converge in the new set of Vastwood card. These are mechanics that track the colors used to pay for a spell. And so 2 cards that you play at Modern are Engineered Explosives and Valley Guardian Raven. So Engineered Explosives cost X, you can pay 2 and sacrifice it to destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters of Engineered Explosives. And it's a mechanic called Sunburst, which says if this permanent would enter the battlefield from the stack as a non-creature, it enters the battlefield with the number of charge counter on it equal to the number of colors that were paid for its mana cost. So, if Thalia Garden of Craven is in play, which has the ability that makes non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast, a player might try to ask you like, how can I like EE and kill this Thalia somehow? They say an island doesn't want to play. So what this player can do, and they need to ask you the right question, because you can't coach them. But what they're trying to figure out is, can I cast my EE for 1, then when I'm determining the cost, when I'm applying cost addition, then cost reduction, then final cost set, effective cost, set cost specific number, the EE's cost will change from 1 to 2. Then they'll play the cost by casting their island and swamp for blue and black, and cast their EE using true colors even though X was 1. At that point, EE would enter the battlefield with 2 charge counters on it, because the game doesn't have any way of sort of tracking how you paid for this cost, how you paid for additional cost. There's just the cost of the spell, which in this case was 2 generic mana. You paid that in 2 different colors, and so even though EE's X was 1, you pay 2 different colors for it, and it would enter the battlefield with 2 charge counters. And so at that point, you could use the EE later to destroy the Thalia, because you have 2 charge counters now on your EE. Question?
Another good point is if your opponent has a bunch of tokens you want to blow up in addition to Thalia, and you want to cast it X equals 0, you still have to pay the tax, but you don't have a color.
Yeah, you need a colorless mana source. Yeah.
If you have any, if you have any basic lands that are wasted, you can't pay that
Yeah, so if you want to cast into your explosive, say for like, you want to have 0 charge counter, yeah, you would need to have a colorless source. You still need to pay the tax, and the tax is the entire cost of the spell. You track how many colors you pay for that. So if you pay any mana that was colored for the tax, you're still going to get countered on it. I found another question.
Is that basically how you explain that interaction to a player who, like, if they ask the right questions, but like, if they don't specifically say how, they can't obviously specifically say how do you kill Thalia with engineered explosives, but if they ask the right question, you basically explain how Sunburst interacts with taxes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably what you might do is ask them what they're doing and then help them get the result. Like if they say they're paying it and you say what is X and they say X is 1 and then they pay 2, then the only result is there's 2 counters, right? So you would just explain that it has 2 counters rather than trying to answer the questions before they execute an action to understand what's happening. That's usually a good way to go around coaching. Say, what are you doing? Now I'll help you understand what the result is.
Next is Leonin Arbor, everyone's favorite hate bear. So Leonin Arbor has this ability that players can't search libraries, and any player may pay 2 mana until end of turn to ignore the spec until end of turn. So Leonin Arbor's ability allows players to take what's called a special action. You might be familiar with special actions from playing land or paying the morph cost on your morphs. Players can do this anytime they have priority, and this does not use the stack. So suppose a player A has a fetch land and 2 other lands that produce mana, and they're opponent is Leonin Arbor. What they have to do here is if they want to guarantee that their fetch land will actually search for a land, they need to pay Leonin Arbiter's special action, though by the last time they pass priority before their fetch land is going to resolve. So if a player activates their fetch land, just stares at their opponent, waiting for their opponent to prompt them to pay for Leonin Arbiter's cost. Their opponent is going to pass priority back, and that fetch land will resolve, and they don't get an opportunity to pay for the special action on Leonin Arbiter. So you have to pay for Leonin Arbiter's ability if you want to guarantee your fetch land resolves before you last pass priority with your fetch land activation on the stack. Now, one of the fun things about this, if you were to say wait for Leonin Arbiter, this Leonin Arbiter is a new object with a new ability, and you have to pay for it again. So if you were to say have a Leonin Arbiter, your opponent would try to activate the fetch land, and before they pass priority for the last time, they would pay Leonin Arbiter's tax. At that point, because special action was taken, priority is always passed after special actions happen. And so if the player with Leonin Arbiter was in a blanket, you'd have to pay for the tax again.
No.
So I know that if you don't specifically state that you're maintaining priority, it's assumed that you're not maintaining priority in your actions.
Yes.
But is this the kind of case where, like, if I said I craft my fetch land to go and fetch, and I will pay 2 for Leonin Arbiter, is that something that we can assume that they are just doing in a proper order?
Yeah, sure. So if you're out of order, sequencing applies. So one of the default tournament shortcuts is players are assumed to be passing priority when they cast a spell or activate ability, if they don't explicitly maintain priority. player goes, I'm going to crack my fetch and take the Leonin Arbiter, then that's out of order sequencing, and so this is going to be fine. If they, like, tap their lands and crack their fetch in one action, or like crack their fetch with the graveyard, tap their lands, this is fine. This is what's called out of order sequencing. Question?
So, my opponent cracks a fetch land. In response, I activate my Ether Vial. He doesn't respond to Ether Vial. Vial resolves and the Arbiter pokes in. He's not going to get priority and be able to pay for the Arbiter before his fetch land resolves?
No, priority is going to be faster. So here, when you finish resolving the activated ability of the Ether Vial and put in a creature, or don't. After a spell or ability resolves, the active player gets priority, and priority is passed back and forth before the next object on the stack will resolve.
Oh, okay, so they'll get priority then.
Yeah, they'll get priority. Basically, they'll always get priority.
I think I'm line with this right, but it's horrible.
You got a control click.
Yep.
You have to remember to do it before.
You have to have cracked the lion's eye diamond before.
Okay. Next, there are these two cards that have abilities that fly on layer 7C and track your life total. So these cards are Sarah Ascended and Death Shadow. Sarah Ascended, if you have 30 or more life, it's +9/+5 with flying, and Death Shadow is -6/-6 for it makes your life total. So these abilities apply on the battlefield, but nowhere else. And these abilities, because they always apply, can lead to some interesting combat damage steps. So if your life total changes during the combat damage step, when you go to check state-based actions, when right before a player would receive priority in the combat damage step, you're going to have these abilities, maybe in relevant cases. So often, Sarah Ascendant can be involved in a combat where it takes damage, but also puts the player controlling it up to 30 life. And so when you go to check state-based actions, it's going to be a 6/6, so it's probably do that. And similarly, if you have a Death Shadow, say the player with a Death Shadow, they're being attacked by a creature with Trample. During combat damage, the Death Shadow could say take lethal damage by the Trampler, and the remaining damage would be assigned to the defending player, or Planeswalker. But then when you go to actually check state-based actions during combat damage, the Death Shadow, even though it dealt lethal damage when you were assigning damage, is now bigger and won't die. So this is when it will come up. Yes, he's constantly checking. He's going to lead to really messy combat. Usually everyone gets blown out by this match balance. Exile. In addition to being my favorite 2 words to say whenever I'm judging or playing in a battle within the card block limited event, it also is relevant to the flashback mechanic. A lot of play either with, say, cards like Ancient Grudge or Snapcaster Mage, which grants instant sorcery flashback. So Remand is this great card that says counter target spell, and if that spell is countered this way, you return it to its owner's hand instead of putting it in that player's graveyard. And flashback is this mechanic with the reminder text of you may cast a card from your graveyard for its flashback cost, then exile it. Part of the full rules text that's hidden in the comprehensive rules for flashback is you cast spell for its flashback cost, you can exile it. You would exile that spell anytime it would leave the stack. And so Remand is going to try to put that spell back into its owner's hand, but Flashback's comprehensive rules text is going to kick in, and because that spell would be leaving the stack, instead you're going to exile it instead of putting it back into its owner's hand. So this way, against Flashback spells, Remand functions as a hard counter spell that also draws a card. Okay, next I'm going to talk about 2 very similar cards that have different questions.
How about Remand and Jade's versus Garlic?
Jason's project is slightly different. It only says to exile it would go to your graveyard, and so the card will be like Remand normal and go to the hand.
Basically, you can't cheat with flashback and go back.
Yeah, but with Jason you can't. It's not like that.
If I would like the card to be exiled, am I allowed to do that?
No.
Aren't there both replacement effects? For instance, I control the affected object, I can convert like Jason or Remand?
No, so no, you're
Remand will put it back in your hand.
When you're applying Remand effects, putting it into the hand.
Let's say I have a spell being countered by Remand, right? So that card being countered, so it's going to the graveyard. There are 2 replacement effects applied to this. One from Jason's card, one from Remand. Can I choose to apply Jason's effect instead of Remand's effect?
Remand's effect is.
No, Remand's effect happens first because that's part of Remand resolving. It's putting the spell back in your hand.
Yeah. So when you're ordering replacement effects, you apply self-replacement effects first, then control changer replacement effects, then copy changer replacement effects, and finally all replacement effects in whatever order the affected player wants. And so here, because Remand's ability to self-replacement effect, no one gets a choice in this. It's going to go back to hand. Okay, I'm going to talk about mechanics here.
One more.
The text on Remand specifically says to put it into its owner's hand instead of into that player's graveyard. If another effect, like Jace or something that isn't flashback specifically, is trying to apply a different replacement effect, like sending it to Exile, wouldn't Remand's replacement effect not actually apply because the card's not trying to go to the graveyard, it's being redirected somewhere else.
So you're going to apply the self-replacement effect of Remand. So Rest in Peace's replacement effect isn't going to apply to the card that actually tries to go to the graveyard, and you're going to apply Remand's self-replacement effect first because you do a self-replacement effects, control, copy, everything else. And so Rest in Peace falls into the everything else category, so you're going to apply the self-replacement effect. Okay.
Remand is basically changing what it needs to actually spell.
Okay, next. Chromatic Sphere and Chromatic Star. These cards feel very similar, but they're subtly different. So Chromatic Star has this ability that you can tap and sack it and pay one to add mana to any color of your mana pool and draw a card. And Chromatic Star has the same effect except for draw a card as a triggered ability whenever it's put into a graveyard. So Chromatic Sphere's ability is called a mana ability. So there's two types of mana abilities, activated and triggered mana abilities. I'm going to ignore triggered mana abilities for now, talk about activated mana abilities. An activated ability, the mana ability is put add mana resolution, doesn't target, and it's not a loyalty ability. So like Cause of the Hammer or Xenagos ability that makes mana, it's a loyalty ability, so it doesn't, it's not a mana ability, so it uses the stack. Carpet of Flowers, a targeted ability, I guess it's a triggered ability, but if the ability targets it would make mana, it's not a mana ability. And Death Ray Shaman is a target, so it falls in the category of activated ability, it's not a mana ability.
Spectral Search Ball.
I don't know what that is. Okay, so Chromatic Sphere. Alright, so Chromatic Sphere's ability is mana ability. This means that it doesn't use the stack, it can't be responded to, and priority doesn't go back and forth. So there's a stack that sees play called Lantern Control, and it often looks at the top cards of both players' library and tries to deny the opponent drawing relevant cards. So Chromatic Sphere, if a player has a relevant card on top of the library, they want to guarantee they get it, and they have Chromatic Sphere in play. They can just activate the Chromatic Sphere and draw a card with a mana ability. Doesn't use the stack, can't be responded to. They have to have priority, but the Lantern player can't do anything. They don't get priority to mess with the control of the Chromatic Sphere being able to draw the card they want. Chromatic Star is different. This is a triggered ability with Chromatic Sphere. The Chromatic Star is put into a graveyard. So while it's usually a better card, because you can't ever really not move the card off of it, unless it's like Rest in Peace or something. In this situation, Chromatic Sphere is better, and players might mess up, and this is the mana ability, so it doesn't use the stack. Lightning Storm. So I talked about it on the already. There was the Ace of Grace, and the first one was Lightning Storm. So this is being slightly into policy, but like I said earlier, players are assumed to be passing priority unless they explicitly maintain it. Player has Lightning Storm, and they just look at their opponent and don't say anything like one, like go, that's fine. The player then can't start discarding a bunch of land. What the player with Lightning Storm needs to do is they have Lightning Storm, and then either like one action start discarding land, or say they're maintaining priority, start putting much land in their graveyard, and then start looking at their opponent for priority to be passed Lightning Storm to resolve. Okay. And then finally, my last thing I'm going to talk about is Valakut the Molten Tentacle. So Valakut the Molten Tentacle, we talked about earlier, is land from battle to battle, when it checks whenever the round is about. It says whatever amount enters the battle under your control, if you control these 5 other mountains, Valakut the Molten Tentacle deals, you may have it deal 3 damage per creature or player. If you play this at Escape Shift, which lets you sacrifice lands, get much land to play. Typically, the play pattern you're going to see is the player will stack 7 lands, get 6 mountains in Escape and Valakut, and deal 18 damage to their opponent, who's done at least to himself by now, or they will their opponent, so that's going to kill them. You also might see a player go for Escape of 8 lands, getting 2 Valakuts and 6 mountains, doing 36 damage, or 1 Valakut and 7 mountains, doing 21 damage. The important thing to know about Valakut is it has this intervening if, which is rules technology that checks if when a trigger ability would trigger, you see if the intervening if is true, and if it's not, the trigger ability never triggers. And you also check on the resolution, and if the intervening if is for resolution, then the ability or spell, the ability to remove from the stack never resolves. So if there's a Escape Shift that happens, and there's 6 mountains in a Valakut, and one of those mountains goes away, say bound or destroyed, the trigger for Valakut that tracks that mountain is still going to deal damage because that mountain's trigger sees 5 other mountains. However, when the other 5 mountain triggers go to resolve, their intervening if is going to be false because that mountain that was gone counted as their 5 other mountains. and one of those mountains is no longer ground. Now there's only 4 other mountains. So those trigger abilities go to resolve, they're going to be removed from the set. So typically what a player is going to want to do, and you have to be careful here of not coaching them, is if they think one of their mountains could be messed with, what they want to actually do is not try to overkill their opponent by going with 2 elephants and 6 mountains for 36 damage. What they probably want to do is go for an 8 landscape shift with 1 Valakut and 7 mountains, which is 21, and that'll work through any single mountain being dealt with.
So, yeah, just to clarify, so if you escape shift and you get the 6 mountains in a valley, and then you beast within 1 mountain,
yeah,
they still take 3?
Yeah, they still take 3. The mountain that was destroyed trigger still sees 5 other mountains.
Gotcha.
So bad, and reading it will be satisfied, but the rest of the mountain won't.
You say you said that you could get an escape shift for 2 Valakuts. What was the 2 options?
So they could go 2 Valakuts and 6 mountains, which is 36 damage, and they could go for 1 Valakut and 7 mountains, which is 21 damage. They probably want to do 7.
So if they do the 2 and 6, they only get 6 damage.
If they do 2 Valakuts and 6 mountains, then 1 of the mountains is like dealt with, then they're going to.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Then you just said Valakut, the triggers on top of it.
Yeah. Trigger kind of source, so if you mess with Valakut, nothing's going to change. With this, I'm going to conclude my presentation about rules, interactions, and modern. I thoroughly enjoyed giving this presentation, as well as everyone's thoughtful questions, and I look forward to interacting with all of you at events in the future.
Yeah, so let's get this. And then you do